And right now, Tésia is standing by. That's right.
Yeah, and you're actually with Bob Ballard from the National Weather Service. What's the latest, Tésia?
That's right. We're all jumping on. So we've got to have our hats off, and that is to Robert Ballard and everyone at the National Weather Service. Aloha, Robert. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
Perfect. I'm glad we can hear each other. So everyone watching, this is the Science and Operations Officer at the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. And on YouTube, press conferences, you have been doing such an amazing job keeping us updated. We thank you for that, answering our questions. I have to give all the credit to you guys there. So thank you. Mahalo, mahalo. Let's ask a few questions right now. Can I ask you, was there any substantial rain amounts recorded this morning for especially the eastern end of the state as that system did pass on through?
So far, the rainfall, the bulk of the rainfall from Douglas has remained offshore. Now, it's not far offshore. The rain shield is starting to scrape Maui County. So we'll start to accumulate that rainfall as it moves through. Every little bit that Douglas goes north at this point, more north than west, is good news, and it would keep conditions over the islands. But we do think that at some point we're going to see more of a westward turn toward the islands, and that would bring more of the rain and the wind that you've been talking about across the smaller islands.
Earlier this morning, we said, or you said, that for Oahu, we can expect some of the wind threats by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock this afternoon. Is that still the same, or is it expected earlier, later?
Yeah, that's kind of an early onset time, so that would be about the time that we would expect things to begin downhill. The conditions would start to more definitively weaken around 1 or 2 o'clock this afternoon. That timeline still looks good. Of course, as we go into the evening and nighttime hours, it'll be pretty touch and go as we watch to see exactly how Douglas goes. But at this point, we think that there's a pretty good chance that we're going to see strong winds and heavy rain on parts of Oahu this.
Hey, Bob, when you mean strong winds, do you mean tropical storm force winds, anywhere from that range of 39 to 73, or are we expecting a little less?
Yeah, that would be sustained winds, and maybe not everybody is going at the same time. The mountains do very interesting, strange things to our winds, as we all know. And so as Douglas goes by, some areas are going to be getting really strong winds, and some areas at that moment will not be getting strong winds. But yeah, I think we could see tropical storm force sustained winds in some areas, and then some spots could see hurricane force gusts. And that might be even if the center goes just a little north. Now, like I said, some of the computer model guidance has us really concerned, and it still shows a little westward jog pretty much right into Oahu later today or into tonight. We really hope that that doesn't happen, but that's why we have a hurricane warning up for the smaller islands.
That's right. And then I know that we've seen this storm dramatically increase all the way to a Category 4, then substantially weaken within the time to a Category 1. In the last few hours, well, let's say the last at least 7 hours that I've been tracking it, I've seen it stay the same maximum sustained winds, same west-northwestward motion at 16 miles per hour. Can you explain why that weakening has pretty much stopped?
Yeah, we think that as the center of Douglas began to move over the warmer water closer to the main Hawaiian Islands, that may have slowed the weakening trend down or temporarily stopped it. We do still expect, and in fact, we have the Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunters. They're sending us great information. They're literally flying through the storm right now, doing crisscross patterns and getting us updated data. We're seeing signs that the weakening trend may have resumed, and we're going to keep an eye on that data to make sure that that's a real trend that we're seeing. But I would expect at this point that it looks like a very slow, gradual weakening trend is resuming for the afternoon into the evening. That said, that does not preclude the idea that we could still see damaging or destructive winds, as well as really heavy, intense rain and a storm surge on the east side on top of really high warning level, life-threatening surf.
That's right. And we went from surf. Let's talk about that flash flood watch, which is still in effect. And it says about 5 to 10 inches of rain is possible. Now, for Hawaii, that doesn't seem like a lot. But can you talk about that, how much damage this really can cause?
Yeah, the 5 to 10 inches of rain, of course, around here, you know that when it rains hard, it rains really hard. we can get flash flooding in a short amount of time if you get 2, 3, 4, 5 inches of rain in just an hour's time. And we would expect that if the center gets really close, we would see intense rainfall amounts like that. The mountains only make it worse. They squeeze that tropical moisture right out of the atmosphere. And so we are really going to be looking for the possibility of intense flash flooding rainfall. If you remember Darby a few years ago when we got big thunderstorms that just dumped tremendous amounts of rain, but only in a 3 or 4 hour period. But that caused a lot of damage and flash flooding on Oahu.
And normally if the storm does move slower, we usually see a lot more rain accumulate as well. I know we know the cone of uncertainty. Do you see any slower movements, or do you think that system's going to slow down at all moving across the island chain?
I don't think that we're going to see a really significant slowing trend. I think that it may go just a little bit slower than what we're seeing now. You make a really good point, though. This is not like Lane, where we're expecting 30, 40, 50 inches of rain as a really slow-moving hurricane comes up to the islands. Douglas is going to continue moving toward the west-northwest at 15, 18 miles per hour, and so that's going to moving right along. But again, really heavy rainfall possibly in a short amount of time.
Thank you, Doug. I have one more two-part question. I know you're very busy. We can see Maui County, especially with just dancing with that cone of uncertainty right there at the brink. Can we talk a bit more on the timeline for the western end of the state that seems to be more in, I guess I would call it that threat zone? Can you talk about the timeline of wind impacts for Oahu throughout Kauai County and then rain impacts for Oahu and Kauai County?
Yeah, sure. That's a great point. As along where the worst weather is occurring is going to move along with it. So we have a little bit of time on Oahu, still a few more hours before things start to go downhill here on Oahu. Again, like you said earlier, looking at early afternoon for the onset of the storm, and then things will probably get worse as we go into the evening and early overnight, and then hopefully improve as we get into Monday. Kauai will be a little bit later. They'll have most of today, should be pretty much fine with Douglas remaining well to the east. But then as Douglas gets closer, we expect maybe the first part of the storm, the onset of the heavier rain and starting the wind increase would be around 7, 8 o'clock for Kauai, and then into the overnight hours and late night. That's when you're really going to see conditions deteriorate and the worst of the storm would hit, with things not getting better on Kauai until a little later into Monday.
Thank you, Bob, so much for your time. You and your team there at the National Weather Service, we definitely aloha you, mahalo you, and your team for keeping us updated. And we definitely encourage you to stay safe and get a break every once in a while. Thank you again.
Thank you for helping.